Betrayal beneath the rain. The first shovelful of mud struck her shoulder before her mind could fully grasp what had been decided. Cold, heavy earth slid down her back, and in that instant the truth settled in with terrifying clarity. She was not leaving the forest alive. She knelt inside a shallow pit that smelled of wet soil and decay, rain streaming down her face, blurring her vision. Beyond the trees, faint flashes of red and blue pulsed through the darkness. For a heartbeat, hope tried to rise, but it collapsed just as quickly. Those lights were not there to save her. They were there to keep others away, to ensure no one came close enough to hear her scream. Her wrists were bound behind her, the restraints biting into her skin. Her knees sank deeper with every shift of weight, swallowed by the soft, rain-soaked ground. When she lifted her head, she saw 3 figures standing over her. Police uniforms, badges dulled by the storm, faces empty of doubt or hesitation, as if this were nothing more than another task to finish before sunrise. She had trusted those badges once, believed in what they were meant to represent. A voice ordered her to keep her head down. It wasn't mercy, it was convenience. Shoveling was easier when the target didn't look back. Each heavy throw landed closer than the last. Clumps of earth slid across her jacket, crept into her collar, pressed cold and damp against her skin. The sound of rain merged with the dull thud of soil, forming a steady, relentless rhythm, one that felt final. She tried to speak, tried to remind them that people knew she was missing, that she had evidence, names, files, recordings, proof that could destroy careers. One of them crouched closer, close enough that she could smell rain and metal on his breath. His voice dropped to a whisper, calm and almost kind, as he told her that accidents happened in places like this all the time, especially to women who asked the wrong questions. Fear tightened in her chest as the pit grew higher around her legs, the weight-stealing sensation, her breath speeding up despite every effort to stay calm. Panic, once it understands there is no escape, becomes something alive. Mud splashed across her face. She squeezed her eyes shut as the smell of wet earth filled her lungs. Her thoughts flickered back to earlier that day, to the moment she had nearly turned around, nearly ignored the files she'd found, nearly convinced herself that believing in corruption was safer than believing in the truth. Above her, one of the men laughed nervously and told the others they should hurry before the rain washed away the tire tracks. A flashlight beam swept through the forest, slicing between branches, searching, not for her, but for witnesses. She didn't see what stood beyond the edge of that light. She didn't know that her death was no longer the only thing watching her. The watcher in the trees. Higher up the slope, hidden among the soaked trunks and hanging branches, a man stood motionless. Rain seeped into his jacket, ran along the line of his jaw, but his breathing remained slow and deliberate, disciplined by years spent learning how not to be seen, how not to be heard. His eyes never left the scene below. Beside him sat a large military dog, muscles coiled, ears angled forward. The animal was not calm. It was controlled. Stillness was something it had been trained into, a lesson learned through repetition and survival. Silence in moments like this meant life. Hours earlier, the man had noticed the unmarked patrol car. Something about it had felt wrong, an instinct sharpened by war and loss. He had followed at a distance, far enough to remain invisible, close enough to understand. When he saw the woman dragged from the vehicle and forced into the trees, doubt disappeared. This was not a mistake, not a bad arrest. It was an execution carried out behind official symbols. Below, the pit was filling. The woman's movements were growing smaller as the weight climbed. Her breathing carried through the rain in short, broken sounds. The man's jaw tightened. He measured distances without looking away. Angles, timing, variables that could not be misjudged. A low vibration passed through the dog's chest. A warning growl so quiet it was meant for only one set of ears. The man's hand closed more firmly around the leash. His mind was already moving faster than his body, mapping the descent, the moment, the cost of waiting too long. He knew this truth better than most. Hesitation kills as surely as a bullet. A flashlight swept closer this time, The cone of light cut through leaves and rain, passing just a few feet from where the man stood frozen in shadow. The dog did not move. Neither did the man. The beam slid on, blind to them both. Below, a shovel lifted again, heavy with mud. The woman opened her eyes and stared up at the dark sky, unaware that death was no longer alone with her, that somewhere in the rain-soaked trees, a soldier and his dog were seconds away from turning a grave into a battlefield. The man shifted his weight forward. If he waited any longer, there would be nothing left to save. When the grave fights back, the shovel froze midair. From the darkness of the trees, the dog erupted forward, not with barking, but with a sound that tore through the rain like ripping steel. It was deep, commanding, absolute. Every man in uniform snapped his head toward the noise, instinct overriding reason. A split second too late to understand what they had just unleashed. The soldier moved at the same instant. He slid down the muddy slope with controlled speed, boots barely catching as gravity seemed to favor him. His voice cut through the chaos, sharp, steady, as he shouted for the woman to keep her head down. Chaos, when shaped correctly, could be turned into a weapon. One officer lunged for his radio. The dog reached him first, slamming into his side with trained force, teeth stopping inches from flesh. A perfect demonstration that required no contact to be understood. Obey or suffer. Another man staggered backward, boots losing purchase in the same slick ground he had used minutes earlier to bury someone alive. He fell hard, disappearing into the mud with a gasp. The third tried to raise his weapon. His hands shook, his eyes wide with a fear he had never known on duty. Authority shrinks when it realizes it no longer holds control. Before the barrel could level, the soldier closed the distance and stripped the weapon away in one brutal, efficient motion, sending it spinning into the muck. Below, the pressure stopped rising. The woman folded forward, choking on sobs as her lungs dragged air back in. Each breath came in jagged bursts as understanding broke through the terror. She was still alive. The sounds above her were not the final moments she had been preparing for. They were the sounds of justice arriving late, drenched and furious. The soldier dropped to one knee beside the pit and cut the restraints at her wrists. The blade flashed briefly beneath the police lights. His voice was calm, grounded, as he told her she was safe now, even though both of them knew that safety was a word that would take time to feel real again. Behind them, the corrupt officers lay face down in the mud, hands bound with plastic ties, their badges pressed into the same earth they had meant to use as a weapon. The dog stood watch, eyes alert, rain sliding from his coat as if it had no power over him. The soldier relayed coordinates through a secured line, not to local dispatch, but to people who would not let this disappear. He understood something: corruption depends on silence doing the hardest work. When distant sirens finally cut through the forest, the woman was helped from the grave meant to hold her name. Her legs trembled, her clothes heavy with rain and soil, but with each step away from the hole, her spine straightened a little more. She looked back once, at the man and the dog who had emerged from the storm like something unreal. She couldn't find words yet, but the truth in her eyes needed none. Later, headlines would speak of bravery and exposed corruption. None of them would capture the quiet moment when the soldier draped his jacket over her shoulders, or when the dog rested his head gently against her knee, anchoring her in the simple, undeniable fact that she had survived. In the forest, as rain slowly erased footprints and tire tracks alike, one thing remained unchanged. Sometimes evil almost wins, and sometimes it doesn't, simply because someone was watching when it mattered most.